7 children and the Alps, supposedly. Beautiful music, gorgeous music.
In 1960,
A strange sound on set that changed everything in 1965. Something unexpected happened during the filming of The Sound of Music. It wasn't a serious accident or a major problem with the actors or the script. It was just a noise, a strange, silly noise that nobody expected, and yet, that noise nearly ruined one of the most romantic and emotional scenes in the entire film. This moment took place during the famous gazebo scene, where Maria and Captain Von Trapp finally confessed their love for each other. It was supposed to be a quiet, magical moment filled with emotion, but instead, every time the actors tried to shoot the scene, the air was filled with an odd, wet, squishy sound. At first, people on set thought it was just a technical issue, maybe a wire or microphone problem. But as the noise continued during take after take, people began laughing and losing focus. The scene, which should have taken just a few hours, ended up dragging on for a long time. Nobody knew exactly what was causing the noise, and that made it even more frustrating. The cast and crew kept trying to act through it, but the sound was just too distracting. Eventually, they had to stop everything to find out what was going on. What they discovered would become one of the strangest secrets in movie history, one that was hidden from fans for decades. It wasn't until years later that Julie Andrews finally shared what really happened in that gazebo. A sound so ridiculous, the studio didn't even want the public to know about it. How a Broadway show became a Hollywood legend. Before we go deeper into the forbidden scene and that strange sound, let's take a look at how The Sound of Music became the movie we all know today. It started out not as a film, but as a Broadway musical. The story was based on the real-life tale of Maria von Trapp, a young nun who left her abbey to care for the children of a widowed naval captain in Austria. Maria eventually fell in love with the captain, and they married. Their story was both heartwarming and heroic, especially because they escaped the Nazis by fleeing across the mountains. During World War II, the original stage version was a huge hit in New York City. That success caught the attention of Hollywood producers, who believed it could become a powerful movie. 20th Century Fox took on the project, hoping to recreate the magic of other musicals like OK, La Homa, and My Fair Lady. The team knew that the casting had to be just right. They brought in Robert Wise to direct, and he carefully selected actors who could bring both charm and seriousness to the roles. The final film included catchy songs, beautiful settings, and a moving story of love, family, and courage. But even with all the talent and effort behind the scenes, no one could have predicted that one little sound made by a special effects mistake would nearly wreck one of its most important scenes. Julie Andrews and the pressure of big expectations at the heart of The Sound of Music was Julie Andrews, who had just come off her success in Mary Poppins. She was already a big star, known for her singing voice and warm screen presence. The studio paid her $125,000 to play Maria, which was a decent amount at the time, but it ended up being one of the best deals in Hollywood history. The film went on to make over $300 million worldwide, and Andrews' role became iconic. But success didn't come without pressure. Everyone expected the movie to be perfect. The producers, the director, and the cast all worked long hours to make sure every scene looked just right. That's why the gazebo scene was so frustrating for everyone involved. Julie Andrews had to perform a deeply emotional moment falling in love and singing something good, but each time they tried to film it, something ruined the take. The lighting team had set up special effects to make the scene look magical. They used soft glowing lights placed under the floor of the gazebo to give a romantic feel. But those lights had plastic covers that didn't fit tightly. As the heat built up under the floor, the covers made a strange sound, something like a lawn where raspberry. It was a ridiculous noise that sounded like someone passing gas. Every time the sound happened, it broke the actors' concentration and made the crew laugh. Julie Andrews later said they couldn't help but laugh along. It was just too silly to ignore. Despite being professionals, the cast had to stop filming again and again. Unable to keep straight faces, Christopher Plummer struggles in secret. While Julie Andrews tried to stay professional, her co-star Christopher Plummer had a harder time. Plummer played Captain Von Trapp, and though he did a great job on screen, he often felt frustrated during the filming. In interviews, he admitted that he didn't really enjoy making The Sound of Music. He thought it was too sweet, too sentimental. He even gave the movie a rude nickname. He called it The Sound of Mucus. Plummer was a serious actor, trained in Shakespeare and drama. and he didn't feel like the role fit his style. He also didn't like the singing parts and had trouble connecting with the character. Plummer and Andrews got along well enough, but they were very different in their approach. While Andrews embraced the joyful and lighthearted parts of the film, Plummer often rolled his eyes. This made filming scenes like the gazebo moment even more difficult, having to say romantic lines in a whisper with soft lights and that ridiculous, fart-like sound in the background tested his patience. It became hard for him to stay in character. He would break out laughing, or worse, get visibly annoyed on camera. This only made the delays worse. Everyone on set tried to stay calm, but the mood became more tense. Time was money, and the longer it took to film the scene, the more it cost the studio. Still, they couldn't move forward until they solved the noise problem. Plummer later admitted that despite his feelings during the shoot, he was proud of the film's final result. But at the time, that gazebo scene nearly drove him up the wall. The studio's panic and a race against time eased. The days passed, and the scene still wasn't finished. The producers started to panic. The strange sound from the plastic light covers was ruining every shot. And even when they managed to get through a take, someone would be giggling in the background or breaking character. It became clear that they couldn't film the scene the way they originally planned, so the team made a big decision. They would shoot the scene with as little dialogue and noise as possible, and then fix the audio later. This meant dubbing in the lines and music during editing. Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer had to record their voices again in a sound studio. Trying to match their lip movements perfectly, it was not ideal, but it was the only way to save the scene. The studio also worried about how this story might get out. After all, if people found out that a fart sound almost ruined a major scene in one of the most expensive movies of the year, it would cause embarrassment. So they kept the mistake a secret. Nobody talked about the gazebo incident publicly. The studio hoped the audience would never notice anything odd, and for the most part, they didn't. The scene looked smooth and magical on screen, just as planned. Most viewers had no idea about the chaos behind it. For years, the truth stayed hidden, locked away in the memories of the cast and crew. A beloved classic hiding a silly secret despite the challenges. The Sound of Music was released to worldwide praise. It won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. It became one of the most successful films of all time and turned Julie Andrews into a household name. Millions of families have watched it over the decades, often during holidays or special events. Its songs like "Do-Re-Mi" and "My Favorite Things" have become part of pop culture. Yet very few people knew that one of the movie's most romantic scenes was nearly destroyed by a silly, fart-like sound. For decades, fans believed the gazebo scene was a flawless piece of filmmaking. The gentle lighting, the quiet music, and the whispered words between Maria and the captain made it one of the most memorable parts of the film. But behind the scenes, it had been one of the hardest scenes to finish. It wasn't until years later, during interviews and talk shows, that Julie Andrews and others began to share the funny behind-the-scenes stories. Andrews told the story with a smile, remembering how she and Plummer had to hold in their laughter while pretending to fall in love. When fans heard the story, they were surprised but also amused. It showed that even a perfect movie can have its silly moments. It made the cast feel more human and relatable, and it proved that sometimes the most memorable scenes come from unexpected problems. How a mistake turned into movie magic in the end. What could have been a disaster turned into a small piece of movie history. The strange sound in the gazebo scene could have ruined the film's emotional climax, but thanks to quick thinking, clever editing, and a lot of patience, the filmmakers were able to save the moment. Viewers around the world fell in love with the scene, and most of them never knew anything had gone wrong. This story reminds us that movie magic doesn't always happen easily. Sometimes it takes a lot of work behind the scenes to make something look simple and beautiful on screen. Even a movie as joyful and beloved as The Sound of Music had its tough moments. But in facing those problems, the cast and crew showed their creativity and professionalism. What started as a noisy, embarrassing mistake became a quiet, emotional moment that touched millions of hearts. And maybe that's the real magic of filmmaking, turning something silly into something unforgettable. Today, fans continue to celebrate The Sound of Music not just for its songs and story, but also for the effort and love that went into every scene, even the ones with strange, funny secrets hidden beneath the surface. The scene in The Sound of Music the cast was forbidden to talk about. When people think of The Sound of Music, they often imagine beautiful mountains, cheerful songs, and perfect moments. But behind one of the most romantic scenes in the movie, something very silly and embarrassing was happening. Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer were trying to film a serious kissing scene inside the gazebo. But every time they leaned in for a kiss, the lights made a strange sound like a loud fart, or what some people call a raspberry. This didn't happen just once or twice, it happened over and over again. Right when the characters were supposed to say emotional lines, the lights groaned and made rude sounds. Christopher Plummer would say something like, "Maria, I love you," and then a big raspberry would echo through the set. They tried to film the scene 20 times, but each time the noise ruined the moment. Julie Andrews said she and Plummer were standing nose to nose and doing their best to stay serious. But every time the sound happened, they couldn't help but laugh. They tried to hold it in, but the more they fought it, the harder they laughed. Eventually, the director, Robert Wise, realized this wasn't working. Instead of wasting more time, he decided to change the way the scene was shot. He told the crew to stop using the fancy lights that were making the noise. Instead, he told them to film the scene in silhouette. That means the camera showed only the outline of their faces, using the soft light coming from the windows of the gazebo. This trick not only stopped the raspberry noise, but it also made the scene look soft and romantic. In the end, the scene turned out beautiful, and no one in the audience knew how much trouble it had caused. But the movie studio, 20th Century Fox, didn't want people to find out. They told everyone involved not to talk about the problems. Behind-the-scenes details were kept secret, and interviews were carefully scripted for years. Fans believed the scene had been filmed perfectly. The truth only came out years later when Julie Andrews began sharing the story on talk shows. While Julie Andrews found humor in the situation, Christopher Plummer had a very different attitude toward the film. He never liked the movie and often complained about it. He called it gooey and gave it the nickname The Sound of Mucus. To him, it was too sweet, too emotional, and not something he wanted to be part of. The lighting issues and constant delays just made him feel worse about the whole experience. Although he didn't complain publicly at the time, he was angry inside. Still, he stayed professional. He showed up to work, said his lines, and tried to do his best. He even admitted years later that he was drunk during some of the scenes. He said this role was one of the hardest he ever played, not because it was deep or challenging, but because he had to pretend to care about something he didn't like. Even when he was drinking too much and feeling unhappy, he never broke character. Somehow, his effort helped create one of the most loved films in history. In a strange way, even though he hated the process, he helped make something unforgettable. One moment that really surprised fans was the music festival scene, where Captain Von Trapp sings Edelweiss with tears in his eyes. It looks like a very emotional part of the movie, and many people say it touches their hearts. But in reality, Christopher Plummer was drunk during that scene. He later admitted this in a DVD commentary and in his 2008 book. He said he had been drinking a lot during filming and called himself a hampered, arrogant young bastard, even though he was not in his best shape. The scene turned out to be one of the most touching in the movie. Viewers saw real emotion, even if it came from a different place than they expected. Plummer's feelings about the movie stayed the same during filming. He still disliked it and made fun of it in interviews. He would joke that acting as Captain Von Trapp felt like flogging a dead horse, and he tried to add a little humor into what he saw as a very sweet and sentimental story. For years, he couldn't even say the name of the film without rolling his eyes. However, time changed his feelings. Decades later, Christopher Plummer admitted that The Sound of Music had grown on him. At first, he only saw the problems, the things he didn't like, but over time, he came to feel proud of his role in the film. It became clear to him that the movie had touched the hearts of millions. There was another surprise for fans as well. Many people don't know that when Captain Von Trapp sings in the movie, it's not always Christopher Plummer's voice. While he did sing the start and end of songs, the longer and harder notes were actually sung by Bill Lee, a professional singer who also worked with Disney. This was done to make the songs sound smoother. Plummer wasn't happy about this. He felt like it took away from his performance. Still, the decision worked. Most people watching the film couldn't tell the difference. Bill Lee's voice blended perfectly, and to this day, many viewers believe it was Plummer singing Edelweiss from start to finish. The adults weren't the only ones who had a rough time during filming. Little Kim Carruth, the 5-year-old girl who played Gretel, almost drowned while filming the famous rowboat scene right before the scene. Julie Andrews was told that Kim couldn't swim. The plan was that when the boat tipped over, Enruz would quickly grab the child and keep her safe. But things didn't go as expected. When the boat flipped, it happened more roughly than planned. Enruz fell the wrong way and couldn't reach Kim in time. Kim went under the water not once but twice. It was a terrifying moment. Another actor jumped into the water and pulled her out. After swallowing a lot of water, Kim threw up and developed a fear of swimming that lasted for years. This was a very scary experience for a child, and it's something many fans never knew happened during the making of such a joyful movie. Julie Andrews also faced challenges during filming. One of the most iconic scenes in The Sound of Music is the opening shot where she spins in the meadow, arms wide, singing joyfully. It looked like a dream, but filming it was very difficult. To capture the shot, a helicopter had to fly very close to Andrews with a cameraman strapped to the side. Each time the helicopter flew by, the strong wind from the blades would knock her down. She was slammed into the ground over and over again. She said it happened at least 6 or 7 times. Every time she got up, she had to act cheerful and ready to sing. Even though she was being pushed into the dirt, she kept going, smiling on the outside while bracing herself for the next hit. In the end, the scene looked magical on screen, but in real life, it was exhausting and painful. There were even more problems during filming, especially with the actor's hair. Daniel Truhitt, who played Rolf, had to bleach his hair to get the right blonde Nasiera look, but the bleaching was so harsh that it caused lasting damage. He was only 20 years old at the time, but his hair never grew back the same way. It became thinner and weaker. Even years later, when fans met him, they would ask why his hair was now dark. He had to explain that his movie look had come with a permanent cost. Julie Andrews also had her own hair nightmare. The film crew thought the back of her head looked too dark on camera, so they sent her to get highlights, but something went wrong. Instead of a few light streaks, her hair turned a shocking bright orange. Everyone panicked. To fix the mistake, they cut her hair even shorter and dyed it blonde, and Ruse later joked that the platinum blonde color made her feel more Austrian, but at the time, she and everyone else were horrified. As if all that wasn't enough, the weather added more trouble to the set. Nicholas Hammond, the actor who played Friedrich, said that the weather during filming was the worst spring Salzburg had seen in 50 years. It rained almost every day. Many of the bright, sunny scenes that made the movie feel so cheerful were actually filmed under dark skies. The crew had to use huge lights called arc lights to fake the sunshine. They worked hard to make the movie look warm and happy, even though it was cold and wet most of the time. All of these problems, from bad weather and strange noises to near drownings and hair disasters, were hidden from the audience. The final movie looked perfect, but behind the scenes, it was full of stress, mistakes, and even danger. Still, the cast and crew kept going. They worked through the chaos, and in the end, they made something that became one of the most beloved films of all time.